Subscribe to Infidelity Tales Lab. Now let's begin. Mitchell Singleton had spent 15 years documenting the darkness that lived in ordinary people. His true crime documentaries had earned him 2 Emmy nominations and a reputation for getting closer to his subjects than anyone thought safe. He understood monsters because he'd sat across from them, listened to them justify the unjustifiable, watched them smile while describing horrors. That understanding came with a cost: a failed marriage, a strained relationship with his daughter, and the kind of paranoia that made him check the locks 3 times before bed. He was editing footage in his home office when Amber called. Her voice had that breathless quality that made his stomach tighten. "Dad, I need to talk to you about something important." She was 23, working at a marketing firm downtown, living in the apartment he helped her afford. After the divorce 5 years ago, their relationship had become a careful dance of weekly dinners and surface-level conversations. "Everything okay?" Mitchell closed his laptop, giving her his full attention. "More than okay. I've been seeing someone." "It's serious, Dad. Really serious." The happiness in her voice was unmistakable, and it terrified him. "How long?" "For months. We met online. I know what you're going to say, but it's different with Theodore. He's kind, successful, and Mom absolutely adores him." Mitchell's jaw clenched at the mention of Christina. His ex-wife had remarried 2 years ago to a dentist named Paul, lived in a pristine house in the suburbs, and had perfected the art of making Mitchell feel inadequate. If Christina approved of this Theodore, that itself was suspicious. "For months, and I'm just hearing about this now." Amber sighed. "Because I knew you'd react like this. You investigate everyone I date like they're suspects in one of your documentaries. Theodore wants to meet you properly. We're having dinner at Mom's on Saturday. Please be nice." After hanging up, Mitchell sat in the silence of his office, surrounded by case files and crime scene photos from his current project. He'd learned to trust his instincts, and right now, those instincts were screaming. He pulled out his phone and called his sister. Stephanie Singleton answered on the 3rd ring. "Please tell me you're not calling to cancel Sunday brunch again. Amber has a boyfriend. Meeting him Saturday at Christina's. She met him online. And you want to run a background check." It wasn't a question. Stephanie worked as a missing persons investigator for the State Bureau, and she'd helped Mitchell research subjects for his documentaries more times than he could count. She was 2 years younger, sharper than broken glass, and the only person who understood why he couldn't just let things go. "His name is Theodore Stokes. That's all I have. I'll see what I can find. But Mitchell, you can't sabotage every relationship Amber has. You're going to push her away, or I'm going to protect her from someone who isn't what he seems. You see predators everywhere because that's what you document. Sometimes people are just people." But Mitchell had learned the hard way that monsters rarely looked like monsters. They looked like Theodore Stokes, whoever he was. Saturday arrived with the particular dread Mitchell reserved for family gatherings at Christina's house. The colonial in Oak Grove Heights represented everything his ex-wife valued: status, stability, the appearance of perfection. Paul answered the door with his practiced smile, the one that never quite reached his eyes. "Mitchell, good to see you." The handshake was firm, territorial. Christina's in the kitchen. Amber and Theodore are in the living room. The house smelled like rosemary and expensive candles. Mitchell found Amber on the couch next to a man who stood as he entered. Theodore Stokes was 32, according to the minimal information Stephanie had found, though he looked younger. Handsome in an unremarkable way, brown hair, average height, the kind of face that disappeared in crowds. He wore a gray sweater and khakis, everything about him calibrated to seem harmless. "Mr. Singleton, it's an honor to finally meet you." Theodore's handshake was confident, but not aggressive. "Amber talks about you constantly. Your work is incredible. I've watched every documentary you've made." Mitchell studied him, cataloging details. No wedding ring tan line. Minimal online presence, according to Stephanie's preliminary search. A job as a financial consultant that seemed legitimate but vague. Clean record. Everything about Theodore Stokes checked out, which was precisely what worried Mitchell. "Theodore was just telling me about the proposal for his consulting firm." Christina appeared, already championing this stranger. She looked happy in a way that had nothing to do with Paul. Apparently, he's brilliant with investment strategies. Amber beamed at Theodore like he'd hung the moon. Mitchell recognized that look, the complete abandonment of critical thinking that came with new love. He'd seen it in interview subjects who'd married serial killers, who trusted con artists, who'd ignored every red flag because they wanted so desperately to believe. Dinner was an exercise in watching Theodore perform. He asked thoughtful questions about Mitchell's work, complimented Christina's cooking, made Amber laugh with self-deprecating stories about his childhood in Portland. He was perfect, too perfect. Every answer slightly rehearsed, every anecdote designed to endear. How did your parents feel about you moving to the East Coast? Mitchell asked, watching for the tell. Theodore's smile didn't falter. They passed away 6 years ago. Car accident. It's part of why I moved. Too many memories in Portland. I'm so sorry. Christina touched Theodore's hand, shooting Mitchell a look that clearly said be sensitive. But Mitchell had caught it. The slight pause before 6 years ago, the way Theodore's eyes had flickered left before delivering the tragedy. He was lying, or at least not telling the complete truth. Amber mentioned you met online. Mitchell kept his tone casual. Dating app. I almost didn't message her. Her profile was so impressive, I figured she'd never respond. Best decision I ever made. Theodore looked at Amber with what seemed like genuine affection, which somehow made Mitchell more uneasy. Dad's old-fashioned about online dating. Amber said, defensive. Not old-fashioned. Careful. Mitchell met Theodore's eyes. I've documented cases where people aren't who they claim to be online. False identities, hidden pasts. Everyone has something to hide, Mr. Singleton. Theodore's smile remained in place, but something shifted in his eyes. The question is whether those secrets matter. Before Mitchell could respond, the doorbell rang. Christina frowned. She hated unexpected guests disrupting her carefully planned evenings. Paul went to answer it, returning with Stephanie, who looked uncharacteristically flustered. I'm sorry to interrupt, but Mitchell, I need to. Stephanie stopped mid-sentence, her eyes locking onto Theodore. The wine glass she'd been holding slipped from her fingers, shattering on Christina's hardwood floor. The room froze. Stephanie's face had gone chalk white, her hand trembling as she pointed at Theodore. That's not possible, she whispered. You're dead. Stephanie grabbed Mitchell's arm with enough force to bruise, dragging him toward the hallway. Behind them, Christina was apologizing profusely. Theodore was expressing concern about the broken glass, and Amber looked mortified. Stephanie, what the hell? Mitchell started. Outside. Now. Her voice left no room for argument. They ended up on the front porch, the early evening air sharp with autumn chill. Stephanie was pacing, her investigator's composure completely shattered. That man in there, the one calling himself Theodore Stokes and dating your daughter, he's using a dead man's identity. Mitchell felt his blood run cold. Explain. 6 years ago, I worked a missing persons case. Theodore Marcus Stokes, age 26, disappeared from his apartment in Portland. No sign of struggle, no note, just gone. We investigated for 8 months. Found his body in the Columbia River. Stephanie pulled out her phone with shaking hands, scrolling through old case files she shouldn't have had access to from home. Positive ID through dental records. Cause of death was drowning, but there were signs of trauma. We suspected homicide, but could never prove it. She turned the phone toward Mitchell. The driver's license photo showed a young man who bore a superficial resemblance to the Theodore inside. Similar build, similar coloring. But the eyes were different. The bone structure was different. Similar enough to use the identity if you weren't looking closely. Different enough that anyone who'd known the real Theodore would spot the fraud immediately. Who was he really? Mitchell's mind was already racing through possibilities. I don't know, but someone went to elaborate lengths to assume Theodore Stokes' identity. Got a job using his credentials, established a life, and now he's dating your daughter. This isn't random, Mitchell. He targeted Amber for a reason. Through the window, they could see the dinner party attempting to recover. Theodore was helping Paul clean up the broken glass, playing the concerned boyfriend perfectly. Christina was fussing over Amber, who looked ready to die of embarrassment. We need to call the police, Stephanie said. And tell them what? That you recognized a man from a 6-year-old case? He'll deny it, show his identification, and disappear before we can prove anything. Then Amber's in danger, and we've lost the advantage of him not knowing we know. So what do you suggest? Mitchell watched Theodore through the window, noting the way he'd positioned himself to keep both exits in view, the careful casualness of his body language. This was a man used to deception, practiced at it. I suggest we find out who he really is, what he wants, and why he chose my daughter. Then we destroy him. Stephanie studied her brother. This is why Christina left you. This obsessive need to control every situation. This is why I'm still alive. I've spent my career studying predators. Steph, I know how they think, how they operate. This man is dangerous, and he's in my daughter's life. I'm not going to wait around for him to make his move. If we're doing this, we do it my way. Legal by the book. Mitchell didn't respond. They both knew that if it came down to protecting Amber, he'd burn the book and dance on its ashes. They went back inside to find Theodore making coffee, Amber sulking on the couch, and Christina shooting daggers at Stephanie. I apologize for the dramatic entrance, Stephanie said smoothly, her professional mask back in place. Migraine came on suddenly. I should head home. Let me walk you out, Mitchell said. At her car, Stephanie gripped his shoulder. Be careful. If he's willing to steal a dead man's identity and court your daughter, he's already shown he's capable of significant deception. People like that don't hesitate to escalate. People like that are counting on fear to keep their victims quiet. I'm not most people. Mitchell returned to find Theodore alone in the kitchen, rinsing coffee cups. The facade of the perfect boyfriend remained, but now Mitchell could see the performance for what it was. Your sister okay? Theodore asked. She'll be fine. Chronic condition. Mitchell poured himself coffee he didn't want, using the moment to get closer, to study the man wearing a dead man's name. You look familiar. Have we met before? I don't think so. I'd remember meeting someone whose work I admire. Maybe I documented someone you knew. I've covered a lot of cases over the years. The briefest flicker of something crossed Theodore's face. Calculation, maybe even hatred, before the pleasant mask returned. My life's been pretty boring, thankfully. No true crime stories here. Everyone has a story, Theodore. It's just a matter of knowing where to look. They stood in the kitchen, two men pretending a civility while a silent war ignited between them. Mitchell had spent years interviewing killers, and he recognized the look in Theodore's eyes. This was a man who'd done terrible things and would do them again. I hope you know how much I care about Amber, Theodore said quietly. I'd never do anything to hurt her. People who need to say that usually have something to hide. Theodore smiled, and for just a moment, the mask dropped entirely. What looked back at Mitchell was cold, empty, and utterly devoid of the charm he'd been projecting all evening. We all have secrets, Mr. Singleton. Even you. Especially you. Before Mitchell could respond, Amber appeared in the doorway. Dad, are you interrogating my boyfriend? Just getting to know him. The drive home was tense. Amber refused to speak to him, texting furiously, probably to Theodore, probably about what an overbearing father she had. Mitchell didn't care. He'd protected her from danger before, and he'd do it again, even if she hated him for it. Back at his house, Mitchell pulled out his laptop and started digging. Theodore Stokes, the real one, had been 26 when he disappeared. Worked as a financial analyst, degree from Portland State, no criminal record, well-liked by colleagues. His disappearance had been treated as voluntary at first, then as a missing persons case, finally as a probable homicide after they found the body. Stephanie had texted him the case files. Mitchell pored over them, looking for connections. The real Theodore had no link to Mitchell's work, no connection to any documentary he'd made, no obvious reason for someone to steal his identity and target Amber. Unless it wasn't about Theodore at all. Unless the dead man's identity was just a convenient mask for someone with a very different agenda. Mitchell pulled up his archive of past projects. 15 years of documentaries meant hundreds of interviews, thousands of people whose lives intersected with his work. Victims' families, investigators, criminals, lawyers, witnesses. Any one of them could have a grievance. His phone buzzed with a text from an unknown number. Stop digging, or Amber pays the price. Mitchell stared at the message, then slowly smiled. Theodore had made a critical mistake. He'd shown his hand too early, revealed that he was monitoring Mitchell's investigation. That meant he was worried, which meant Mitchell was on the right track. He texted back, "Come at me directly. Leave my daughter alone." The response was immediate. She was always the target. "You're just collateral damage." Mitchell felt rage surge through him, the kind of cold fury that had fueled his best work. This imposter thought he could threaten Amber? He'd clearly never studied Mitchell's documentaries closely enough. The monsters Mitchell documented always made one fatal error. They underestimated how far a parent would go to protect their child. He called Stephanie. "I need everything you have on Theodore Stokes' murder investigation. Every witness statement, every piece of evidence, every lead you couldn't pursue." Mitchell, he just threatened Amber. "This is happening whether you help me or not. I'd rather have you on my side." Stephanie was quiet for a long moment. "I'll send the files, but promise me you won't do anything stupid." "I promise I'll do whatever it takes." After hanging up, Mitchell opened a new document and began mapping out what he knew. Theodore, or whoever he really was, had gone to extraordinary lengths to build this false identity. That took planning, resources, and motive. People didn't steal dead men's identities on a whim. The question was, what did this man want? And why had he targeted Amber to get it? Mitchell's phone buzzed again. Another text from the unknown number. "You're wondering who I am. Keep wondering. By the time you figure it out, it'll be too late." But Mitchell was already 3 steps ahead, his mind cataloging possibilities, discarding unlikely scenarios, building profiles. This was what he did. He got inside the heads of people who hurt others. He understood their logic, their motivations, their weaknesses. And every predator had a weakness. Mitchell just had to find it before Theodore made his move. He worked through the night, cross-referencing the real Theodore's life against his own cases, looking for the connection he knew had to exist. Somewhere in these files was the answer. Somewhere in the past was the reason this man had chosen to destroy Mitchell's family. And when he found it, Theodore Stokes, or whatever his real name was, would wish he'd stayed dead. By dawn, Mitchell had consumed enough coffee to fuel a small army and filled 3 legal pads with notes. The file Stephanie sent painted a picture of the real Theodore Stokes, an ordinary man who'd been in the wrong place at the wrong time. His murder had never been solved, the case gone cold after 6 months of dead ends. Mitchell's eyes burned as he studied the crime scene photos. The real Theodore had been found in the Columbia River, weighted down with chains. The medical examiner noted defensive wounds, suggesting he'd fought his killer. There was something ritualistic about the murder, the chains, the river, the complete erasure of the victim's identity before it was stolen. His phone rang at 6 a.m. Stephanie, sounding like she hadn't slept either. "I think I found something." The real Theodore Stokes had a roommate when he disappeared, guy named Damon Alexander. They'd known each other since college, worked at the same firm. After Theodore's disappearance, Damon left town. Just packed up and vanished. We tried to track him down for questioning, but hit walls everywhere. Mitchell's pulse quickened. "You have a photo?" "Sending it now." The image loaded on Mitchell's phone, a driver's license from 6 years ago, showing a man in his mid-20s. The face staring back at him was the same face that had sat at Christina's dinner table, the same face currently dating his daughter. Damon Alexander, Mitchell breathed. He didn't steal a stranger's identity. He killed his roommate and took his life. That's my theory, but proving it 6 years later, with Damon having established himself as Theodore, that's going to be nearly impossible through official channels. He's got social security records, employment history, everything under Theodore's name. He's lived as this person long enough that legally he is Theodore Stokes. Then we don't go through official channels. Mitchell, no. We do this right. He murdered his roommate, Steph, dumped him in a river, and stole his entire existence. Now he's using that stolen identity to get close to Amber. For what? Revenge? Money? Whatever it is, I'm not waiting for the legal system to catch up while he's alone with my daughter. Mitchell hung up before Stephanie could argue further. He pulled up everything he could find on Damon Alexander. Born in Seattle, degree in finance from Portland State, same school as the real Theodore. They'd been roommates for 4 years before Theodore's death. On paper, Damon had been unremarkable. No criminal record, no red flags. But 6 years ago, Damon Alexander had effectively ceased to exist. His social security number hadn't been used, his driver's license had expired, his bank accounts had been closed. Every digital footprint had been carefully erased in the months following Theodore's murder. And then Theodore Stokes had resurged. New job in Philadelphia, new social media presence, new life. Damon hadn't just stolen an identity. He performed a complete transformation, living as his murdered roommate for 6 years. The question remained, why target Amber now? Mitchell opened his documentary archive again, this time searching for any connection to Seattle, Portland, or financial crime. His documentary, 3 years ago, The Banker's Betrayal, had exposed a Ponzi scheme that destroyed hundreds of lives. The architect of that scheme, Leonard Miles, had been from Seattle. He'd been convicted and sentenced to 20 years. Mitchell pulled up the trial transcripts, scanning through witness testimony. There, a junior analyst who testified against Leonard, providing the documentation that sealed the conviction. The analyst's name, Marcus Damon. Marcus Damon. Damon Alexander. It wasn't proof, but it was too close to be coincidence. Mitchell dug deeper. Marcus Damon had worked at the same Seattle investment firm as Leonard Miles. His testimony had been crucial, but it had also painted a target on his back. After the trial, Marcus had moved to Portland, changed his last name to his middle name, Alexander, and tried to disappear. But you couldn't hide from Leonard Miles's network. The man had connections, resources, people who owed him favors. Mitchell found a forum post from 5 years ago. Someone claiming Leonard's associates had put out contracts on key witnesses. Marcus Damon's name was on that list. So Damon had murdered his roommate Theodore and taken his identity to hide from Leonard's revenge network. He'd lived quietly as Theodore Stokes for years, probably thinking he'd successfully disappeared. Until Mitchell's documentary had aired. Until Damon had seen his own testimony broadcast to millions of viewers. Until he'd realized that the documentary filmmaker had made him visible again, had put his face back out into the world where Leonard's people could find him. And now Damon wanted payback. He'd researched Mitchell, found his weakness, Amber, and crafted the perfect revenge. Seduce the daughter, gain the family's trust, and destroy Mitchell from the inside. Mitchell's hands trembled as the pieces fell into place. This was his fault. His documentary had exposed Damon, had put him back in danger, had created the motivation for this elaborate scheme. His phone buzzed. Text from Amber. Theodore's taking me to dinner tonight. Don't call me. I need space from your paranoia. Mitchell immediately texted back. Don't go. I can explain everything. Amber, no. I'm done with your conspiracy theories. He's a good man, and you're trying to ruin this because you can't stand to see me happy. Mitchell called. Straight to voicemail. He tried again. Same result. She'd blocked him. He was reaching for his keys, ready to drive to Amber's apartment, when another text came from the unknown number. Dinner reservations at Rousseau's, 7 p.m. She'll be wearing the necklace I gave her. Try to interfere, and I'll make sure she finds out exactly what kind of man her father really is. All the corners you cut for your documentaries. All the lives you ruined for ratings. I've done my research too, Mitchell. Your daughter thinks you're a hero. Let's keep it that way. The threat was clear. Damon had dirt on Mitchell. Probably the morally gray areas every investigative documentarian operated in, that deals with sources, the manipulation of subjects, the times Mitchell had prioritized story over ethics. Released strategically, that information would destroy not just Mitchell's career, but Amber's image of him. Mitchell sat in his office, surrounded by the evidence of his life's work, and realized he was in checkmate. Damon had planned this perfectly. He'd become the boyfriend Amber loved, the man Christina championed. He'd positioned himself as the victim of Mitchell's baseless paranoia. If Mitchell exposed him now, Amber would think it was a desperate attempt to maintain control, unless Mitchell could prove Damon was a murderer. But how? The evidence of Theodore Stokes' murder was 6 years old and 3,000 miles away. Damon had successfully lived as Theodore for years. He had documentation, witnesses, a complete fabricated history. Mitchell pulled out his phone and called someone he'd sworn he'd never contact again. Jim Patton answered on the fourth ring. Mitchell Singleton. Figured I'd hear from you eventually. Jim had been Mitchell's primary source for the banker's betrayal, a former FBI agent who'd gone private after getting tired of bureaucracy. He specialized in finding people who didn't want to be found and making problems disappear. Mitchell had used him for the documentary, then distanced himself when Jim's methods proved too questionable. I need information on someone, Mitchell said, and I need it by tonight. Must be important for you to call me. Last time we spoke, you said my methods were ethically compromised. The situation has changed. Situation usually does. Jim's voice carried the satisfaction of being proven right. What do you need? Mitchell explained the situation: Damon Alexander, Theodore Stokes, the murdered roommate, the stolen identity, the threat to Amber. Jim listened without interrupting. 6-year-old murder, stolen identity, elaborate long-con revenge plot. This is way past information gathering, Mitchell. This is going to require action. I know, and you're okay with that? With what action might mean? Mitchell thought about Amber wearing the necklace from a murderer, sitting across from a man who'd killed his best friend to escape consequences. He thought about Damon's cold eyes when the mask had slipped, the empty promise that he'd never hurt Amber. I'm okay with whatever it takes. Then I'll see what I can find. But Mitchell, once we start down this road, there's no going back to ethical documentaries and Emmy nominations. You understand that. Find me something I can use. Today, after hanging up, Mitchell forced himself to think strategically. Damon was smart, patient, and had spent years planning this revenge. He wouldn't slip up easily. But every predator had an ego, and ego created exploitable weaknesses. Mitchell opened his laptop and began drafting an email to Damon's work account. Theodore Stokes' work account, technically. The subject line, documentary opportunity. The email was carefully crafted. Mitchell was working on a new project about successful financial consultants who'd rebuilt their lives after personal tragedy. Theodore's story, losing his parents, starting fresh on the East Coast, finding love despite past pain, was exactly the narrative he was looking for. Would Theodore be interested in being featured? It was bait. Mitchell knew Damon's ego wouldn't resist the opportunity to rub Mitchell's face in his own deception, to be interviewed by the man he was destroying, all while maintaining the Theodore facade. If Damon agreed, Mitchell would have him on camera, under lights, answering questions Mitchell controlled. And somewhere in that interview, the mask would slip. It always did. The response came within an hour. I'd be honored. How about tomorrow afternoon at your studio? Mitchell smiled grimly. Damon was good, but he'd just made his first tactical error. He was so confident in his Theodore performance that he thought he could fool Mitchell even in an environment Mitchell controlled. Tomorrow afternoon, Mitchell would have Damon in his studio, away from Amber, under the scrutiny of cameras and lights. He'd conduct it like any other interview. Pleasant, professional, disarming. And then, when Damon was comfortable, Mitchell would start asking questions about Portland, about roommates, about the Columbia River. And when Damon's face flickered with recognition or fear or rage, it would all be on tape. But first, Mitchell had to get through tonight. Had to let Amber go to dinner with a murderer and trust that Damon wouldn't make his move yet. The revenge was too elaborate to rush. Damon wanted Mitchell to suffer, which meant keeping Amber safe until the moment of maximum impact. Mitchell texted Stephanie, I need you to follow them to Russo's tonight. Stay close but invisible. If anything feels wrong, you intervene immediately. Stephanie, already planning on it. I've got backup too, called in favors with 2 colleagues. We'll have eyes on her the entire night. That would have to be enough. Mitchell spent the rest of the day preparing for tomorrow's interview, researching Damon's life as Theodore, looking for the cracks in the foundation. Jim Patton called at 4 p.m. Found something interesting. Theodore Stokes' credit cards have been used exclusively on the East Coast for 6 years, except for one transaction. 3 years ago, right after your documentary aired, someone used his card at a bar in Portland, near where the Real Theodore used to live. Just one transaction, like someone got sloppy, got emotional, went back to the scene. You think Damon went back to Portland? I think he saw your documentary, panicked that his face was out there again, and went back to verify that Theodore's murder was still cold. The bartender from that night remembers a guy drinking alone, asking questions about old missing persons cases. said the guy seemed agitated, kept looking over his shoulder. Can you get me that bartender's statement? Already done. Sending it now. But Mitchell, this is circumstantial at best. It proves Damon was in Portland, not that he killed Theodore. It proves he's connected to the case. It gives me leverage. 7 p.m. approached with agonizing slowness. Mitchell sat in his office, tracking Stephanie's updates via text. Amber and Damon had arrived at Russo's. They were seated at a corner table. Amber looked happy. Damon looked like the perfect gentleman. Mitchell pulled up the surveillance footage from his front door camera. He'd installed them after doing a documentary on home invasions. Damon had been to pick up Amber twice before, but Mitchell reviewed the footage anyway, looking for tells. Both times, Damon had glanced up at the camera with a slight smile, aware he was being watched, enjoying the performance. At 8 p.m., Stephanie texted, "Something's off." Damon keeps checking his phone. He's anxious about something. Mitchell's instincts flared. Damon was waiting for something or someone. He texted Stephanie, "Don't let Amber leave with him alone. Make up an excuse, any excuse." But before Stephanie could respond, Mitchell's doorbell rang. He approached cautiously, checking the camera feed. A man in a delivery uniform stood on his porch holding a package. Mitchell didn't open the door. "Leave it on the porch," he called through the intercom. "Requires signature, sir." Everything in Mitchell's body screamed danger. He pulled up the delivery company's tracking website. No packages scheduled for his address. The man on his porch was no delivery driver. Mitchell went to his safe, pulled out the handgun he'd purchased after interviewing a stalking victim 5 years ago. He'd never thought he'd actually need it. He opened the door with the chain still attached. "I'm not expecting any packages." The man's pleasant expression never changed. "Mr. Singleton, I have a message from an old friend. Leonard Miles sends his regards." Mitchell's blood froze. Leonard, the banker from his documentary, currently serving 20 years. The man Damon had testified against. "Leonard wanted you to know that he appreciates your work." That documentary was very informative, especially the part about Marcus Damon. "We've been looking for Marcus for a long time." The pieces rearranged themselves in Mitchell's head. Damon hadn't targeted Amber for revenge. He'd targeted her to get to Mitchell. Not because of the documentary, but because Leonard's people had seen Mitchell's work, connected Marcus Damon to Damon Alexander, and now they needed Mitchell's help locating their target. "I don't know where Marcus Damon is," Mitchell said. The man smiled. "But you know where Theodore Stokes is." "Same person," Mr. Miles figured. "He's very smart about these things. Here's the deal. You give us Theodore's current address, and we forget you were involved in making Marcus famous. You refuse, and we have a conversation about how your documentary work interfered with Mr. Miles's business operations. That kind of conversation tends to end badly." Mitchell's mind raced. Leonard's people wanted Damon dead. If Mitchell gave them the address, they'd kill him, and Amber would be safe. But it would mean being complicit in murder, crossing a line he'd never crossed despite years of documenting darkness. "I need time to think," Mitchell said. "You have until tomorrow morning." Mr. Miles is patient, but not infinitely so. The man handed a card through the crack in the door. "Call this number with the address. Or don't call, and we'll assume you've chosen the hard way." The man left. Mitchell locked the door, his hands shaking. He'd spent his career observing evil from a safe distance, documenting it without touching it. But now evil had entered his life directly, demanding he choose sides. He called Stephanie. "Get Amber out of that restaurant now. Don't explain, just get her somewhere safe." "What's happening?" "Leonard Miles's people are in play. This is bigger than Damon's revenge. It's about old debts and old crimes, and Amber's caught in the middle." Mitchell heard commotion through the phone. Stephanie's voice, Amber's protests, Damon's concerned questions. Then Stephanie came back on the line. "We've got her. She's furious with me, but she's safe." "What about Damon?" Mitchell looked at the card in his hand. One phone call, and Damon would be eliminated. The threat to Amber would be over. All he had to do was dial a number and tell killers where to find their target. "Keep Amber at your place tonight. Don't let her contact anyone. I'll explain everything in the morning." "Mitchell, what are you planning?" "I'm planning to end this without anyone else dying." He hung up and stared at his research, at the crime scene photos of Theodore Stokes' body in the Columbia River, at the life Damon had stolen and worn like a costume. Damon was a murderer who deserved to face justice. But justice through Leonard Miles meant execution, meant Mitchell becoming exactly what he'd spent his career documenting, someone who let darkness use him. There had to be another way, a way that exposed Damon, protected Amber, and didn't require Mitchell to become a killer's accomplice. He spent the night planning, reviewing the interview questions for tomorrow, preparing the trap. Damon thought he was walking into a friendly documentary interview. Instead, he'd be walking into a confrontation where all his secrets would be laid bare. And if Leonard Miles's people wanted Damon, they could find him in a jail cell where he belonged. The studio lights were set to maximum intensity, the kind that made subjects sweat and squint, that wore down their defenses. Mitchell had conducted hundreds of interviews in this space, and he knew exactly how to use environment as a weapon. Damon arrived at 2 p.m., still playing Theodore Stokes. He wore a crisp button-down shirt and expensive watch, every detail of his appearance calculated to project success and stability. "Mr. Singleton, I really appreciate this opportunity," Damon said, shaking Mitchell's hand with practiced ease. "When Amber told me her father wanted to interview me, I was honored." Mitchell gestured to the chair positioned directly under the lights. "Let's get you mic'd up. This shouldn't take more than an hour." As the production assistant, actually Stephanie wearing a crew t-shirt, fitted Damon with a microphone, Mitchell observed him. Damon was confident, comfortable, showing no signs of nerves. He thought he was in control. "So, we'll start with some basic background," Mitchell said once they were rolling. "Tell me about your childhood, your family." Damon launched into the Theodore Stokes story. Growing up in Portland, close relationship with his parents, their tragic death 6 years ago. He delivered it smoothly, with practiced emotion in all the right places. "That must have been devastating," Mitchell said. "Losing both parents at once. How did you cope?" "I moved away, started fresh. Sometimes geography helps with grief." "Did you have friends who helped you through that time? A roommate maybe?" The slightest pause. "I lived alone after they died. Needed the space to process." Mitchell leaned forward. "That's interesting, because I was looking at Portland records, and it seems like Theodore Stokes had a roommate right up until the month he disappeared. Guy named Damon Alexander. Did you know him?" The mask flickered, just for a second, but the camera caught it. I don't recall anyone by that name." "That's strange, because you two lived together for 4 years. Worked at the same company. By all accounts, you were best friends." Mitchell slid a photo across the table. The real Theodore Stokes and Damon Alexander together, arms around each other's shoulders, smiling at a company party. Damon stared at the photo, his composure cracking. "Where did you get this?" "Public records. Social media. The things people leave behind. You want to know what else I found? Theodore Stokes' body. In the Columbia River. Weighted down with chains. Dead 6 years ago, right around the time you say you started your new life. This interview is over." Damon reached for his microphone. "Sit down, Damon." Mitchell's voice was cold steel. "Or should I call you Marcus?" Marcus Damon, the analyst who testified against Leonard Miles. The man who's been hiding behind his dead roommate's identity. Damon froze, his hand on a microphone clip. "You don't know what you're talking about. I know you killed Theodore Stokes and stole his life. I know you did it to hide from Leonard's revenge network. I know you saw my documentary, panicked that your face was visible again, and decided to destroy me for it. I know you targeted my daughter as part of that revenge. Prove it." Damon's pleasant mask was completely gone now, replaced by something sharp and dangerous. "Prove any of that. You've got circumstantial evidence and conspiracy theories. Meanwhile, I'm Theodore Stokes. I have documents, employment records, 6 years of living as this person. Your daughter loves me. Your ex-wife adores me. Who's anyone going to believe?" Mitchell smiled. "They're going to believe the man who confessed on camera. I haven't confessed to anything. Not yet. But you will." Mitchell leaned back. "See, I understand people like you, Damon. I've interviewed dozens of killers, and they all share one trait. They need to be recognized. You spent 6 years hiding, pretending, living as someone else. That must be exhausting. Part of you wants someone to know how clever you've been. You think I'm going to break down and confess because you understand psychology? No, I think you're going to confess because Leonard Miles's people are already outside, waiting for my signal. They know who you really are, and they know I know where you are. Right now, I'm the only thing standing between you and them. Damon's face went pale. You're lying. Mitchell pulled out his phone, showed him the card from Leonard's messenger. They gave me until this morning to hand you over. I didn't call, but I also didn't say no. They're watching this building, Damon, waiting to see what I decide. You'd hand me over to killers? I'd hand over the man who threatened my daughter, but I prefer to hand you over to the police. So here's the deal. You confess on camera to killing Theodore Stokes. You explain everything, why you did it, how you've been living his life. And in exchange, I call my sister, who happens to be the missing persons investigator who worked Theodore's case, and you get protective custody. You face justice for murder, but you stay alive. And if I refuse, then this interview ends, you walk out of here, and Leonard's people handle it their way. You'll be in the Columbia River by tomorrow, just like Theodore. Damon sat silent, calculating. Mitchell could see the wheels turning, Damon trying to find a third option, the escape route. But Mitchell had spent all night closing those routes, anticipating every move. You're bluffing, Damon finally said. You're not the type to let assassins kill someone, even someone like me. You spent your career documenting justice, not vigilante murder. You're right. I'm not that type. Normally. Mitchell's voice hardened. But you threatened my daughter. You wormed your way into her life, made her care about you, all to hurt me. For that, I'd make an exception. The silence stretched. Finally, Damon laughed, a bitter sound without humor. You almost had me. The whole setup, the intimidation, the choice between confession and death. Very documentary filmmaker of you. But I know something you don't. What's that? Leonard Miles is dead. Heart attack in prison 3 months ago. There's no revenge network, no assassins waiting outside. You're bluffing with a hand that doesn't exist. Mitchell felt his stomach drop. Damon was right. He hadn't verified Leonard's status, had assumed based on the messenger's visit. If Leonard was dead, then who had sent that messenger? Damon stood, pulling off the microphone. Nice try, Mitchell. But you can't touch me. I'm Theodore Stokes, upstanding citizen with a perfect record. You're a paranoid documentarian with a history of obsessive behavior who's harassing his daughter's boyfriend. Who do you think people will believe? They'll believe the evidence. The Portland police will run your fingerprints, compare them to Damon Alexander's records. Damon Alexander's records were sealed and expunged as part of his witness protection agreement. Good luck accessing those. Damon smiled. I did my homework too, Mitchell. I've spent 6 years building this identity. You think I didn't prepare for every contingency? He headed for the door. Mitchell had one card left to play. I know about Seattle. Damon stopped. I know you weren't just Marcus Damon, analyst. You were Marcus Damon, Leonard's partner. You helped him run the Ponzi scheme. You stole millions from innocent people. And when it all came crashing down, you cut a deal, turned state's evidence, and testified against him to save yourself. Damon turned slowly. Prove it. I don't have to prove it. I just have to say it. On my platform, to my audience. Your face will be everywhere again, Marcus. And this time, it won't just be Leonard's people looking for you. It'll be the families you destroyed, the investors who lost everything, the victims who want justice. Where will you hide then? Steal another identity? Kill another roommate? You wouldn't. That's defamation. I'd sue you into oblivion. Sue away. Discovery would be very interesting, don't you think? Your lawyers would have to prove you're not Marcus Damon. That would require explaining who you really are. And once that process starts, once people start digging, Mitchell shrugged. You're intelligent enough to see where this goes. Damon's jaw clenched. What do you want? I want you away from my daughter. I want you out of our lives. And I want you to disappear. Really disappear this time, not steal someone else's identity. You leave tonight, you never contact Amber again. You start over somewhere far from here. Do that, and I keep my mouth shut. That's it? No confession, no police. I've spent my career believing in justice. But I also know the reality. The case against you is shaky. You might beat it, might slip through the system. And if you're free, you're a threat to Amber. This way you're gone, and she's safe. Damon studied him. How do I know you won't come after me once I leave? Because I don't care about you, Damon. I care about protecting my daughter. You disappear, that mission's accomplished. You stay, or you ever come back, and I dedicate every resource I have to destroying you. I'll expose Marcus Damon. I'll tie you to Theodore's murder. I'll make your life so toxic that you'll beg for witness protection again. Mitchell could see Damon weighing options, calculating risks. Finally, he nodded. I'll be gone by tomorrow. But Mitchell, your daughter will hate you for this. She loves me. When I disappear, she'll blame you for driving me away with your paranoia. You'll lose her over this. Maybe, but she'll be alive to hate me. That's a trade I'll make. After Damon left, Mitchell sat alone in the studio, the lights still blazing. Stephanie emerged from the control room. You let him go, she said. I know. He killed Theodore Stokes. He deserves to face trial. He deserves a lot of things. But proving he killed Theodore 6 years ago with circumstantial evidence, that's a gamble. And while we're gambling with the legal system, he's free to hurt Amber. This way he's gone. What about justice for Theodore? Mitchell thought about the young man in the photos, smiling next to his future killer. Sometimes justice is messy. Sometimes it's making sure the monster doesn't create more victims. And if he kills again, he won't. He survived this long by being careful. He'll disappear, build a new identity, live quietly. Men like Damon aren't serial killers. They kill out of necessity, not compulsion. He got what he needed from Theodore. He doesn't need to kill again. Stephanie shook her head. I hope you're right. So do I. But Mitchell wasn't right. And the messenger from Leonard Miles had been very real. 3 days after Damon's departure, Mitchell found another package on his doorstep. Inside was a burner phone with a single number saved. He called it. Mr. Singleton, the same voice from before. We appreciate your cooperation, but there seems to be a misunderstanding. When we asked for Theodore Stokes' address, we meant it. He didn't show up at the location you provided. He's gone. Left town. I kept my end. I didn't warn him you were coming. That's not acceptable. Mr. Miles, before his unfortunate passing, left very specific instructions. Marcus Damon needs to answer for his betrayal. We need him found. Mitchell's blood went cold. I'm not a bounty hunter. I don't know where he went. But you're a documentarian with extensive investigative resources. You found him once, you can find him again. You have 2 weeks. Find Marcus Damon. Give us his location, or we'll consider your documentary work an ongoing liability to our operations. The line went dead. Mitchell sat on his porch, holding the burner phone, realizing the terrible mistake he'd made. He'd thought letting Damon go would end the threat, but instead, he'd made himself responsible for hunting down a murderer for other murderers. And he had 2 weeks to figure out how to escape this without destroying everything he'd built. Amber knocked on his door that evening. She'd been avoiding him since Stephanie had pulled her from the restaurant, had ignored his calls and texts. Now she stood on his porch, her face streaked with tears. Theodore's gone. He left me a note saying he had to leave for work, but then I found out he quit his job 3 days ago. He's just gone, and I know you did something. I know you scared him off with your paranoia. Mitchell wanted to tell her everything about Damon Alexander, about Theodore Stokes' murder, about the revenge network and the impossible choices. But looking at her heartbroken face, he couldn't. I'm sorry, was all he could say. Sorry? That's it? You destroyed my relationship, and all you can say is sorry. Amber's voice broke. He was good to me, Dad. He made me happy. And you couldn't stand that, so you drove him away. He wasn't who you thought he was. No one is ever good enough for you. You see monsters everywhere because that's what you look for. Mom was right to leave you. I should have left too. She turned to go, and Mitchell made a decision. His real name is Damon Alexander. He killed his roommate 6 years ago and stole his identity. I have proof. Amber stopped. You're lying. I'm not. Ask your aunt. She worked the case. The man you knew as Theodore Stokes has been dead for 6 years. Damon killed him, dumped him in the Columbia River, and became him. No, you're making this up to justify what you did. I have his confession on tape. Not a full confession, but enough. And I have evidence, photos, documents, witness statements. I can show you everything. Amber's face was white. Why would he target me? Because I made a documentary that exposed him to dangerous people. He wanted revenge. You were the method. The betrayal in her eyes shifted from Mitchell to the memory of Theodore, and Mitchell watched his daughter's heartbreak in real time. She'd trusted someone completely, had imagined a future with him, and now had to process that every moment had been a calculated lie. "I want to see the evidence," she said quietly. "All of it." Mitchell spent 3 hours showing Amber everything. The crime scene photos of the real Theodore, the documentation of Damon Alexander's testimony against Leonard Miles, the Portland bar receipt, the interview footage where Damon's mask had slipped. She sat through it all in silence, occasionally wiping tears, her hands trembling. "He never loved me," she finally said. "It was all fake. I don't know if it was all fake. Sometimes the mask becomes the person. Maybe some part of him cared." "Don't." Amber's voice was sharp. "Don't try to make me feel better by suggesting he had real feelings. He used me to hurt you. That's all I was to him. A tool." Mitchell reached for her hand, but she pulled away. "I need time to process this, to figure out how I didn't see what he was." "You didn't see it because he was good at hiding. This isn't your fault, isn't it? You tried to warn me. Aunt Stephanie tried to warn me. But I was so convinced you were just being overprotective that I ignored every red flag." She stood, gathering her coat. "I need to go. Amber, I'll call you." "Just not yet." After she left, Mitchell sat in his empty house, surrounded by the evidence of Damon's deception. He'd protected his daughter, but the cost was her trust, her happiness, and her innocence. She'd never look at relationships the same way again, would never trust as freely. And Mitchell still had the impossible task of finding Damon before Leonard's people decided to make him a liability. The next morning, Mitchell called Jim Patton again. "I need you to find someone who doesn't want to be found. And I need it done in less than 2 weeks." "Damon Alexander? How did you—" "I keep tabs on my former clients' enemies. Heard through channels that Leonard's people are looking for Marcus Damon. Figured you might need help cleaning up that mess. Can you find him? For a price. And for a promise. Name it. The price is $50,000. The promise is that when I find him, you tell me what you want done. Because finding him is the easy part. Dealing with him, and with Leonard's network, that's where it gets complicated." Mitchell thought about his options. He could find Damon, hand him over to killers, and save himself. He could find Damon, call the police, and hope the legal system worked. Or he could find Damon and do what he'd spent his career documenting, but never doing himself. Take justice into his own hands. Find him first. We'll figure out the rest after. Jim paused. "You're different than when we worked together before. Less idealistic. I have more to lose now." "Good. Idealists get killed in situations like this. I'll be in touch." Mitchell spent the next week in a strange limbo. Amber wasn't returning his calls. Christina had heard about the breakup and blamed Mitchell entirely. Stephanie was walking the line between supporting her brother and being professionally horrified by his choices. And every day, Mitchell wondered if Leonard's people would lose patience, if he'd find another package on his doorstep, if this time the messenger would be less polite. Jim called on day 9. "Found him. He's in Chapel Hill, North Carolina, renting a house under the name James Patton. Actually stole my name, which is personally offensive. He's been there 5 days, keeping a low profile." "How'd you find him?" "He made a mistake. Used his Theodore Stokes credit card at a gas station near Chapel Hill. Just once, probably thought it was safe. I had alerts set up on all his known accounts. From there, it was just surveillance." Mitchell felt his pulse quicken. What's he doing? Building another identity. He's got documents being prepared, new social security card in progress. Your boy's getting ready to disappear again, this time more thoroughly. "I need an address." "Where are you planning, Mitchell?" "I'm planning to end this." Jim was quiet for a long moment. "You sure about that?" "Because ending this has a lot of potential meanings, and some of them cross lines you can't uncross." "I'm sure." "All right, but I'm coming with you. You're not exactly trained for confrontation, and Damon's proven he's willing to kill. You'll need backup." They drove to Chapel Hill the next day, arriving at the small rental house Damon was using as a safe house. Mitchell watched through binoculars as Damon moved around inside, cooking dinner, watching TV, living a quiet domestic life while somewhere, the real Theodore Stokes' family still wondered what had happened to their son. "What's the play?" Jim asked. Mitchell pulled out his phone and dialed Damon's number, the one he'd used as Theodore. Damon answered on the 3rd ring. "It's Mitchell. We need to talk. A long pause. How did you find me? I'm a documentarian. Finding people is what I do. I'm outside your house right now. You can either invite me in, or I can call Leonard's people and let them know where you are. I thought we had a deal. I left, you stayed quiet. The deal changed when Leonard's network decided I'm responsible for delivering you. They gave me 2 weeks. Time's almost up. Another pause. What do you want? I want to offer you a third option. One where you don't die and I don't become complicit in murder. I'm listening. Let me in and we'll talk. Damon opened the door 5 minutes later, his face haggard. He'd lost weight, looked like he hadn't slept properly in days. The careful Theodore Stokes persona was completely gone, replaced by a man running on fear and adrenaline. You brought someone, Damon noted, looking at Jim. Insurance. In case you decide to try something stupid. They sat in Damon's sparse living room. Mitchell noticed the half-packed suitcases, the documents spread on the table. Another identity being constructed, another life being stolen from someone. Here's the situation, Mitchell began. Leonard's people want you dead. I can't stop that without giving them something. But I also can't live with handing you over for execution. So what's the third option? Mitchell pulled out a flash drive. On this drive is everything I have. Evidence of you killing Theodore Stokes, your real identity as Marcus Damon, your involvement in Leonard's scheme. Enough to put you away for decades. And you're giving this to me because I'm not giving it to you. I'm giving it to the FBI, specifically to their organized crime division. In exchange for your testimony against Leonard Miles's remaining network, they'll give you real witness protection. New identity, new life, but this time official. Legal. Damon laughed bitterly. I testified against Leonard once. That's what got me into this mess. Which is why this time, you'll be protected properly. No more stolen identities, no more running. You give them everyone, names, operations, bank accounts. You help them dismantle Leonard's entire network. In exchange, you get a deal for Theodore's murder and real protection. Why would you do this? Help me after everything. I'm not helping you. I'm helping Theodore's family get closure, helping the FBI put away dangerous criminals, and helping myself sleep at night. You're just the vehicle. Mitchell leaned forward. But here's the thing, Damon. If you refuse this offer, I give Leonard's people your address. If you accept and then try to run, I'll find you again and do the same. Your only path to survival is cooperating. Damon stared at the flash drive. And Amber? What does she know? Everything. I showed her all of it. How is she? How do you think? You broke her heart as part of a revenge plot. She's devastated. Something flickered across Damon's face. Regret. Maybe even genuine pain. I didn't expect to. I thought it would be easy, just playing a role. But she was kind. She believed in me. No one's believed in me since before Leonard. Don't. Mitchell's voice was ice. Don't try to make this about feelings. You used my daughter. Own that. You're right. I did. And I'm sorry for what that's worth. It's worth nothing. But testifying, helping bring down the people who made you into this, maybe that's worth something. Maybe that's the closest you get to redemption. Jim stepped forward with a phone. FBI's on the line. They're ready to discuss terms. You got 30 seconds to decide. Damon looked at the flash drive, at Mitchell, at the half-packed suitcases representing another failed escape. Finally, he took the phone. This is Marcus Damon. I'm ready to talk. The FBI moved fast. Within hours, Damon was in federal custody. Mitchell's evidence was logged as part of a new investigation, and the wheels of justice that had seemed so impossible before were suddenly turning. Damon's testimony would dismantle what remained of Leonard Miles's organization, and in exchange, he'd serve 15 years for Theodore Stokes' murder with eligibility for parole in 10. Theodore's family finally had answers. The case that had haunted Stephanie for 6 years was solved, and Leonard's network, the people who'd threatened Mitchell and Amber, were being arrested in coordinated raids across 3 states. Mitchell stood in his studio a week later, editing the footage from his interview with Damon. Not for a documentary, this would never be broadcast, but for himself, as a reminder of how close he'd come to crossing lines he couldn't uncross. Amber visited that afternoon. She still looked fragile, but there was strength in her eyes that hadn't been there before. The FBI called, she said. They need me to give a statement about my relationship with Damon, about what I observed. Are you okay with that? I think so. It helps, knowing that what happened to me serves a purpose, that it's helping stop dangerous people. She sat across from Mitchell. I'm still angry with you. I know, but I also understand why you did what you did. You were protecting me, and you found a way to do it without just becoming one of the bad guys. That couldn't have been easy. It wasn't. Aunt Stephanie told me about Leonard's people, about the threats. You could have just handed Damon over to them. It would have been simpler. Simpler isn't always right. Amber smiled slightly. That's very dad of you to say. She stood, walked to the window, overlooking the city. I've been thinking about trust, about how Damon made me question everything. But you know what I realized? You've never lied to me. Even when the truth was hard, even when it would have been easier to keep secrets, you told me the truth. That matters. Mitchell joined her at the window. I'm sorry you had to learn about people like Damon the hard way. Maybe it's a lesson I needed to learn. I was naive. I wanted to believe in fairy tales and perfect boyfriends. Now I know better. She turned to him. But I also know that there are people who fight against the Damons of the world. People like you and Aunt Stephanie. That matters too. They stood in silence for a moment, watching the city below. I'm going back to therapy, Amber said, to process all this. But I was wondering if maybe we could start having our weekly dinners again. I'd like that. And maybe you could not investigate every person I date. I'll try to restrain myself. She hugged him then, and Mitchell felt something settle in his chest. He'd made mistakes, crossed ethical lines, put his family in danger through his work. But in the end, he protected what mattered most. 3 months later, Mitchell sat in a federal courtroom watching Damon testify against the last of Leonard's network. Damon looked different in the prison orange jumpsuit. Smaller somehow, less threatening. He caught Mitchell's eye once during a recess and nodded slightly. Not gratitude exactly, more like acknowledgement. Two men who'd been caught in an impossible situation and found a way out that didn't require either of them to become monsters. The trial lasted 4 weeks. Mitchell documented none of it. Some stories weren't meant to be told to an audience. Some darkness was personal. On the final day, the judge sentenced the last of Leonard's associates to 25 years. As they led him away, he looked at Mitchell and smiled. Your documentary started all this, you know, exposed Marcus, set everything in motion. You think you're a hero, but you're just as complicit as any of us. Mitchell didn't respond, because maybe the man was partially right. Maybe Mitchell's pursuit of truth had consequences he hadn't foreseen. Maybe documentarians were never as separate from their subjects as they wanted to believe. But he'd also learned something through this nightmare. The difference between documenting evil and becoming it was the choices you made when tested. When Mitchell had been given the option to hand Damon over to killers, to become complicit in murder, he'd found another way. Imperfect, messy, but ultimately just. That night, Mitchell deleted the footage from his interview with Damon. Some stories didn't need to be told. Some truths were better left in sealed evidence lockers and confidential FBI files. He called Amber. Dinner tomorrow? Your place or mine? How about Neutral Ground? That new Italian place downtown. It's a date. But Dad, if you try to background check the waiter, I'm leaving. Mitchell laughed. Deal. As he hung up, Mitchell looked around his studio at the files and footage representing 15 years of documenting darkness. He'd spent his career getting close to monsters, understanding them, showing audiences the human face of evil. But he'd never been closer to darkness than he had been these past months. And he'd learned that the real battle wasn't documenting evil. It was recognizing when it touched your life directly and choosing to fight it without becoming it. The next documentary would be different, Mitchell decided. Less about the darkness in others, more about the light people found to fight it. The victims who became advocates, the survivors who helped others heal, the ordinary people who chose courage over comfort. Because in the end, that was the story worth telling. Not the monsters Mitchell had spent years documenting, but the people who refused to become monsters despite every reason to do so, including himself. Amber called him the next evening with news. I got a promotion. Senior Marketing Associate. They said my work on the Johnson campaign showed initiative and leadership. That's wonderful. I'm celebrating by taking a solo trip to Portland. I know that sounds weird, but I need to see the place where the real Theodore lived. Maybe visit his grave. Pay respects to the person Damon erased. Mitchell understood. Do you want company? No. I need to do this alone. Process everything. Figure out who I am after all this. You're the strongest person I know. I learned from watching you. Even when I was mad at you, even when I didn't understand your choices, I saw how you faced impossible situations and found a way through. That's what I'm trying to do now. After hanging up, Mitchell felt a fierce pride in his daughter. She'd been targeted by a predator, used as a weapon against her father, had her trust shattered, and she was choosing to process that pain instead of being consumed by it. The doorbell rang. Stephanie stood on the porch with takeout and a bottle of wine. Thought you might need company, she said, and probably haven't eaten anything that wasn't microwaved in weeks. They ate in comfortable silence, two siblings who'd navigated darkness together and come out the other side. How's the new case? Mitchell asked. Missing college student. Probably voluntary, but the family wants closure. Stephanie poured wine. How are you doing? Really? I'm okay. Better than I expected. The FBI agent called me. Said your testimony and evidence were crucial to the case. Said you could have handled it differently. Handed Damon to Leonard's people. Looked the other way. But you didn't. I considered it. For about 30 seconds, I seriously considered just making the problem disappear. But you didn't because I'd spent 15 years documenting the choices people make when tested. I'd seen what happens when you compromise yourself, when you decide the ends justify the means. I couldn't become the thing I'd spent my career studying. Stephanie raised her glass. To making hard choices. To finding light in dark places. They drank, and Mitchell felt the weight of the past months finally begin to lift. There would be more cases, more darkness to document or confront. But he'd proven to himself that he could face it without losing himself. The documentary about survivors started coming together over the next months. Mitchell interviewed people who'd escaped trafficking rings, families who'd rebuilt after losing loved ones to violence, advocates who'd turned their pain into purpose. It was harder work than documenting killers. Hope was more complex than darkness, required more nuance to capture. But it was also more rewarding. For the first time in his career, Mitchell finished a project feeling lighter instead of heavier. The documentary premiered at a film festival in the spring. Amber attended, sitting next to Mitchell in the dark theater as audiences watched stories of resilience instead of destruction. This is different from your other work, she whispered. Better. I don't know about better, but it's necessary. The world needs this as much as it needs to know about the darkness. Mitchell thought about Damon, serving his sentence in a federal facility. About the real Theodore Stokes, finally getting justice after 6 years. About Leonard's network, dismantled piece by piece through Damon's testimony. About all the families who'd gotten closure or protection, or simply the satisfaction of seeing justice done. And he thought about himself, a documentarian who'd almost become part of the story, who'd almost made choices he couldn't undo, who'd found a way to protect what mattered without destroying who he was. The credits rolled. The audience applauded. And Mitchell Singleton, documentarian of darkness, felt something he hadn't felt in years. Hope that the light was stronger than the shadows, that people could face the worst of humanity and still choose to be good. It was enough. And there you have it. Another story comes to an end. What did you think? I'd love to hear your thoughts in the comments below. If you enjoy this story, consider joining our community by subscribing. It means the world to us. For more stories like this one, check out the recommended videos on screen. And I'll see you there.